Hello everybody and welcome to the Gyrocopter Flying Club. In this film I'm going to help those with the takeoff phase and provide a film that you can watch at home and practice all those fundamentals so that when you do it for real, it's ingrained. Before I get into that, a brief update because it's been almost 2 months since I did the last video and I've been keeping busy with some post-virus lockdown flying, writing a few webinars and generally being happy at not being able to have to stop at home. I hope everyone is keeping well, and in the UK flying is starting to slow down as the days become much shorter. Sunrise currently is around 7:30 AM and it's dark just after 6, and the weather has started to get a definite wintry chill, and the mornings are often bringing fog and mist patches. In the UK, the combination of the coronavirus lockdown, and who knows how long that was going to affect things over the winter, and the shortened summer flying season will no doubt close the doors permanently on many UK flying schools, and I'm sure other countries are affected in the same manner. This is not good news for gyroplane students because learning to fly one is hard enough in terms of the travel time needed to get to one, and even in the relatively small UK, 2 hours of driving is typical, and one hopes that we might find a way to open up gyroplane training and widen the talent pool, because currently things are centred very much in one place, which is limiting the thinking and the wider interest to get involved. Indeed, some of that thinking has been exported to America, and with the accident rate and insurance premiums rising there, I find it a continued source of mirth as to how this process is sold as an online success. Insurance rates have got so out of control in America. I understand the PRA are seeking to introduce a yearly revalidation scheme as a magic bullet. Yet as we discuss on our webinars, and often in these films, our problems come not from a lack of understanding of what to do when it's been briefed for half an hour, demoed by an instructor several times, and then our student pilot pukes out the correct response a few times to prove he or she could do it. No, the issue is lack of familiarity with that process, and the instructor's skill is the ability to make that process itself not only authentic to what happens in real life, but to keep it uncluttered. It's also important that our student or newly qualified pilot understands that the basics of airmanship are fundamental and something any student or pilot needs to take away as homework. It's important that they understand that beyond the early lessons, the flying course isn't spoon-fed, and all of this takes time. So to the takeoff process. You've been watching takeoffs as background to my chat, and now what we're going to do is to pause the film at various key stages so that you get a good idea about what's required, along with an appropriate pause for you to decide for yourself what you might be looking for. Or you could verbalize elements of technique that you should be doing at various points during the takeoff. Okay, here goes. We'll start the film having already warmed up, done our mag checks, and having taxied to the runway hold. I'm going to pause the film, and you can then decide on what key items to check. Hopefully you checked for the traffic on final approach, made an appropriate radio call, released the rotor brake, and perhaps put on the auxiliary fuel pump. Now we are taxiing to line up and hold. In this film I taxi to the numbers because I wanted to get a consistent starting point for a performance comparison. But during the taxi, what could you be thinking about? Hopefully you've thought about stick position and wind direction, the windsock on the left, or the yaw flag, yaw string is your guide. You can also use the time to check that any warning lights are out, check engine temperatures and pressures, the runway ahead is clear, and that in any shorter taxi, the aircraft's nose wheel is pointing in the direction you want to start the takeoff roll. You might also take the opportunity to see that the compass aligns with the runway heading. Now we're about to start the pre-rotation process, and I'd like you to think about what we need to do to get the rotors up to flying speed. Hopefully you have the wheel brake held in your hand and not locked. You set the engine RPM to around 2000. That prevents the engine from stalling with the increased load of the pre-rotator. You also need to think about moving the stick to a central position, remaining forward in an AutoGyro machine once rotor RPMs are up around 120, and you need to give a thought to your target rotor RPM, which is usually around 200 to 220 RPM. Now I want you to think about what you're going to do once you finish pre-rotating. The pauses in this film are realistic thinking action time for each part of the process, and I hope you can see that most of the elements involved with technique are actually not that time consuming, and in the main it's items of airmanship that are prevalent. So, having pre-rotated to 220 RPM, I hope you suggest we bring the stick fully back, release the wheel brake and add power to get the aircraft moving forward at the speed of a person running. It is in this area I have some fundamental disagreement with established process that clutter the brain. You don't need to tell people to release the pre-rotator because the mechanics of the hand and arm are usually such that that's a given. Likewise, I don't need to obsess about verbalizing if warning lights are out or if the runway is clear. Why? Because I'm still at a very low speed on the runway and I can include those items in a basic scan during the benign ground roll and after the crucial elements of technique are completed accurately. If I screw up my technique, I definitely crash. Neither do I need to clutter my brain with engine RPMs, whether power is at initial or some other power setting I've found, or if I should steer. All these things are either a given or they're irrelevant. So now we're rolling and hopefully you've had the chance to think about what is important next, which is rotor RPM. Is it increasing? If it is, we continue to add power and accelerate the aircraft, and when the rotor RPM is up towards 250 and increasing, we're either ready to follow a technique I prefer where the stick is eased forward slightly, or we can look to obtain a wheel balance. Regardless of your preference, it is at this point that power should be increased to maximum takeoff power, meaning 100% throttle with a Rotax 912 or 115% with a 914. We can then look at the airspeed indicator and build airspeed to our chosen airspeed for climbing away, all the while mindful in our basic instrument scan for any warning lights or limits, and at the same time thinking about performance and if we need to abort or eject the takeoff. If you break down your takeoffs to these basics, it's impossible to get snagged. Fly safely.